На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. It's been a big week in Russian football, as we had last night, as of recording, was the Russian Cup final, which Lokomotiv Moscow won again, and they became somewhat of an expert in that competition, winning 4 out of the last 6 editions of the Cup. Also this week, Stanislav Cherchesov named his bigger and full squad to be trimmed down for Euro 2020. The new Russian under-21 squad was named after a lot of players aged up and graduated, even some of them, to the main squad. So there's lots of new names for analysis in there. And there's just one round of RPL fixtures as week 29 took place last weekend, with some big, intriguing fixtures. And our game of the week this week will be Rubin's 4-2 win away at Arsenal Tula. So we'll get full analysis of that and the reasoning why later on. To join me, as always, is Richard Pike.
Good evening, James. How are we all?
And David Sanson.
Hello, hello. Good to be
I
back.
thought I would change it around a little bit and see if I had you on the toes there for mixing the names up.
I felt a bit sick, honestly, when you did it.
So, Lokomotiv have now won more Russian Cups than anyone else. Well, in fact, they already did. This is their 9th. CSKA is second in terms of Russian Cups with 7. And Loko won it in 2021, 2019, 2017 and 2015. So you could say that they are pretty much experts. And on the day last night, they were simply a little bit too good for Krylia in terms of the genuine RPL quality really did shine through. And 2 players who starred for Lokomotiv in that match, who both scored, in Francois Kamano and Fyodor Smolov, have actually starred for Loko during the entire second half of the RPL season. They've now got a combined 21 goals and assists since the return of football after the winter break. So, Richard, did you enjoy the game? And first of all, did Lokomotiv deserve to win? Because I thought Krylia were pretty damn good on the night and played some really nice stuff.
I caught the second half of it, and I've seen highlights of the first half earlier today. I caught the second half of it live and saw highlights of the first half earlier today. I've got to say, from the highlights of what I saw of the first half, I thought Krylia played very, very well. And, they had some decent chances in the first half, and it looked like, from what I saw of the highlights of the first half, it looked like a pretty even game then. Obviously, I think just before half-time, when the score was 1-1, Guilherme made an excellent save from one of the Krylia players, whose name escapes me, had a shot, and he saved it onto the post. And who knows, that was probably a big moment in the game, because if that had gone in and Krylia had gone in 2-1 up at half time, then you just literally never know. And they certainly tested Lokomotiv on the highlights that I saw the first half. But then in the second half, I think it maybe focused Lokomotiv a bit more. Maybe they were actually stunned by how well Krylia did play in that first half. And, they got the early penalty. I felt a bit sorry for the Krylia captain who gave away the penalty, because even though he'll be the one who gave the penalty away, it was his teammate who made just as bad a mistake to let Zhemeletdinov in, who then squared the ball across. And it was a penalty. I felt sorry for him, but it was a penalty. And then, after that, I think Krylia's momentum subsided a bit. They still had chances, but I think Lokomotiv kept them more in check in the second half than in the first, from what I saw the first half on the highlights. And I think Lokomotiv probably in the second half probably just about did enough. But Krylia certainly give them a really good game. That's basically 3 sides that they've beaten. Krylia have beaten 3 sides to get this far from the RPL, and they gave a 4th one of the better sides in the league, a decent run for the money in a cup final. So they should be absolutely super proud of their efforts. Just probably the RPL side probably just had a bit more quality at the end of the day. So
and Smolov and Kamano are actually the 2 top scorers in the competition, with 4 for Kamano and 3 for Smolov. And that's pretty damn good, considering that Lokomotiv come in at a later point in the competition. They don't play in these initial group stages because of their European commitments. But it was unfortunate for Krylia to an extent. I mean, I am going to say at the start, I will be a little bit biased. I would have loved to have seen Krylia win. They would have been only the second Finettel side, or at the time Finettel side, to have won the trophy. And I don't know, David, could you want to stab a guess if you remember who the first one was way back in the day?
I was wondering, but I've just had an idea. Was it Sibir, Novosibirsk?
No, close. They were runners up. Richard, do you want one guess? Can you think stab?
Was it Terek in 2004 when
It
it's obviously
was.
no, it was Terek back then.
Yeah, so Terek back when they were not owned by a dictator and named after a river and not some man in Chechnya, did win it in 2004 as the only Finettel side. And it would have been great to see Krylia do that, but the way the game played out really played into Lokomotiv's hands for me. Krylia had the majority possession, the majority of shots on goal, and they played some really nice stuff. But unfortunately for them, that's kind of when Loko excel. It's when their backs are against the wall a little bit to that extent. And in every game this season, or the second half of the season, apart from when they were absolutely demolished deservedly by Zenit, they've sat back, they've defended deep and hit on the counter, and it really just did fall into Lokomotiv's hands, Krylia's game style. And I think, well, Krylia's young and team is very exciting, and I hope they stay together to attack the RPL next season and to get a little bit of experience in to complement that exciting youth. Ironically, I think perhaps a little bit too much of that youthful exuberance was maybe made them a little bit naive on the day, especially with the sort of mature battlers like Loko are in this trophy. David, what do you think? How did Krylia play for you? Because I know you were very impressed by some of their build-up play in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I caught the game. Krylia were by far the better team in the first half. They conceded one goal from one long ball when Mehdi Stefan just tried to note it back to his keeper, and he just got caught under it, and the header looped rather than going straight back. And Kamano just had, I was going to say simple, but it was quite a difficult technique because he had to volley it first time and just lob it over Lamayev, who had a good game in goal. But after that and around that, Krylia were absolutely dominant. They scored a really nice goal. Like the goal they scored was really good. Like I saw people on Russian Twitter comparing it to like the Arsenal goal versus Norwich from years back. It wasn't that good, but it was a nicely worked move. As Richard said, they hit the post from Vichigov. Big save from Guilherme. They had a couple of other good chances from Alves and Yezhov. It was just one-way traffic first half. Loko barely had a sniff. And the early penalty second half just killed the game entirely. If that game goes 10 minutes at 0-0 in the second half at the pace that the game carried on, I could have seen it opening up into a really interesting, because even at 1-1 at half time, it was such a finely balanced game. Like we're having an end-to-end tie between two teams from two different leagues. But the penalty early second half, which was a penalty, it just came from Soldatnikov. I don't know how the ball ended up with a local player, but anyway, it came towards Soldatnikov and he just lost his balance as he tried to clear in the box, and Zhenovdinov then squared it into Smolov, who was very clearly fouled by Bozhin. Well, might have almost saved it, to be fair. And then after that, Loko, like I remember at one point, Krylia attacked forward and Loko had 7 players in their own box versus just Sergeyev because it was like a counter-attack. That's how deep Loko were. With 7 players in or around their own penalty area versus 1 Krylia attacker. So they very much just went back to the wall at 2-1. So the early penalty really killed the flow of the game, and it was a much poorer second half as a neutral compared to the first. And the game really just petered out then. They brought on Golenkov and Kabutov later on, but they didn't really have a chance to make an impact. And then very shortly thereafter, Loko got the third just off a set piece, a relatively free header from Murillo, and that was that. So, if we had 2 halves like the first half, it would have been a fantastic cup final, but the early penalty just killed it, and ultimately then Loko, deserved it based on their defensive performance. They didn't give Krylia much in terms of chances in the second half, I can recall very few chances they had second half, honestly. The first half alone, it was anyone's game, and Krylia were very much the better side. So yeah, it was a good game, and I think Krylia has shown that when they come up next year, if they keep that group of players together, they'll be able to compete.
So that is leading into really a good segue in for my next question. I mean, Ivan Sergeyev, of course, has been on fire for Krylia this season in the FNL. He's scored, 53 goals and assists in just 48 games in both the Cup and League this season, which is an unbelievable figure. But first of all, Richard, in terms of Sergeyev, now, in recent years, there's been a lot of FNL top scorers, or among the top scorers, like Alexander Rudenka when he was at Torpedo, Maxim Borsov when Sochi got promoted, Igor Lebedenka before then, to be fair, he was one of the top scorers with Fakel, Glushenkov in his time as a youngster, I think it was Chatanova and Spartak too, Artyom Kuleshev, Kirill Panchenka, and of course Andrew, a fellow RFN man, would hate me if I didn't mention a certain Hassan Mamtov. These have all been players who have either scored for fun in the league or have been up in and around some of the top scorers in the league in recent years. And to be fair, most of them, 90% of them, have moved into the RPL and really failed to impress. Mamtov, of course, being the biggest one out of the lot by the sheer numbers of goals he scored down there, was pretty bad for Angie, pretty poor for Orenburg as well. So, Richard, do you think that Sergeyev could make it? Because he had a few chances in the game, but was really kept quiet by that well-marshalled Lokomotiv backline.
Well, I really hope so, because to be fair to him, these numbers that he's putting up are way off the scale compared to other strikers who've impressed at FNL level before. This rate of scoring is absolutely incredible. The numbers, the sheer numbers that he's putting up are just absolutely crazy. I do hope he stays. I know we mentioned it on last week's pod, didn't we? That about that supposed release clause that he's got. I think it's around €400,000, which will allow him to leave for another club. Personally speaking, I kind of hope he stays at Krylia, and I have a feeling he probably might, because I think out of a sense of loyalty for one, he's got a good vibe going there. Everything's built around him. And I also think as well, Krylia will want to keep him, and maybe they're looking at it from the Sobolev point of view, maybe him too, if he gets a good half season at Krylia next season, first half of the season in the league, and scores like 9, 10, 11 goals like Sobolev did, maybe then, maybe also then that might flush some bids from other RPL clubs. Maybe even they might want to play the waiting game and wait before they buy him, because you just never know if someone jumped in, took the punt and bought him now and he didn't deliver, then then it's not good. But I hope he stays at Krylia, even if it's just for half a season, and then if he impresses and fires in goals like Sobolev did, then maybe in the January window, maybe someone will take a chance on him then. But yeah, in terms of obviously we don't know whether he is going to make the step up. It's the same in every country, everywhere, in every league. Can a striker take that next step up? And I really, really hope he can do. And that's why I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens over the summer with him. Will clubs hang off and wait, or will they take the punt? But I really hope he can make the step up, because like I said earlier in just now, his goal record is absolutely off the charts compared to anything that's come up from the FNL before.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit harsh in my immediate questioning of bringing up just the Loko game, because it must be remembered how good this defence has been in the second half of the season. Of course, the Zenit result aside, which was just how good Zenit were that day. But if you look at Sergeyev, he's not particularly physically imposing like Sobolev is. He's only 183 centimetres. He's not particularly lightning fast like, say, some of the other players who have came through from that level and really thrived in the Premier League. So he does have that against him in terms of he's not one or the other in his physicality. But if you look at his record during the cup run and in a wider context, and not just that one single game, They defeated Akhmat in the semi, and yes, he scored a penalty. He was in penalties, but he had a very good game that day, and it was against Semyonov and Nizic and Wilka, like a very experienced backline. The game before that, he was absolutely brilliant against Dynamo Moscow, who had Odets and Neustadter at the back. And before that, Krylia tore Kimki apart when Kimki were really on a very good run in the league. It was when Cherevchenko came in and they still had the managerial bounce from earlier on in the season. And they I mean, you've seen their results in the league in the second half. Now, they did perhaps take their eye off the game a little bit here, but if you look at that Kimki team that Krylia ripped apart, it was a very, very strong side. And ironically, Krylia themselves were the ones who actually rotated. It was Gatskan came into the team, Denis Yakuba for the first time in a couple of weeks. Tipschenko did. I mean, Sarvelli was dropped. A lot of their regular players were dropped for that game, and they still tore Krylia apart. So I would like to say that he can make it, and I think he will be one to watch certainly next season, whether he's at Krylia or not. So I like to think that he could, and you can't look away from the sheer unbelievable level of those just numbers alone. But as a last little thing on Krylia and on the cup final in general, David, what do you think's next for them? Because they, of course, have been granted their Premier League license now after resolving some financial issues with the RPL. Roman Yezhov has already been linked with a move to Rubin. Can you see them keeping this side together, or are they just going to do the old Krylia like you mentioned last week?
It'll be interesting. Zinkowski was linked away in the winter break. And then the day after the window closed, there was quotes that he'd said that he's now ready to go abroad because he was being linked to Vitesse in the Netherlands. That squad's average age yesterday, the two oldest players were 28 years old, all the rest were 26 or younger. Sergeyev's 26, Zinkowski's 24, I think 25, and the rest of that group are sort of between 22 and 24, pretty much. So it is a young squad in general. No super young players, but in terms of average age, it is a young squad. You like to think that the core of that squad obviously is largely Chertanova. The managers from Chertanova, they brought in 8 players last summer from Chertanova. Soldatenkov, Gorshkov, Zinkovsky, Yezhov, Sarvelli, Yakuba, Vichugov. That's a big core there who all played for Chertanova in the past, and you feel like that bond they've got together and that success they've had this season might be harder for them to leave than other players coming up and getting off for some big teams. We've already seen we've seen Yezhov linked to Rubin, seen Yakuba linked to Krasnodar today as well, and undoubtedly, bigger clubs would be foolish not to look at some of these players. Obviously, Sergeyev being a prime candidate. I think a lot's going to depend on release clauses. Let's not forget Prutsev also joined Krylia from Chertanova, and Sochi signed him about 2 weeks later by activating his release clause that he had in his Krylia contract, which was nearly €1 million. So the chances are they are going to have release clauses. There's talk that Sergeyev is only €400,000 or something. So it might be a case of whether players are wanting to go or not, or whether they're willing to keep that group together and give it a go, because no doubt there's going to be people after these guys. For someone like Zinkowski, we'd always push players and encourage them to go abroad if the option's there. My heart wants them to stay together and give it a go, because you'd like to see this team who was just so dominant in the FNL and who played a style like, compared to Nizhny Novgorod, Nizhny have scored far less goals and concede far less goals. They're a team that pretty much just 1-0 their way to promotion. Whereas Krylia play, free-flowing attacking football. We've seen them beat 4 RPL teams this season now, Rotor, Kimki, Dino and Akhmat in the cup, and give it a good go against Lokomotiv. So you feel like that squad should have the confidence to stick together and give it a go. But it's going to be down to a lot of individual decisions. And, it's going to be hard to call, ultimately.
Yeah, it is. It will be a shame if it happens, but with the low price of these release clauses, I honestly think it is a little bit of an inevitability that a lot of these will be moved on. Maybe not immediately, even if some of the higher clubs get cold feet of whether or not these players can perform in the RPL, and come January and next summer, if they have stayed together, then it's an inevitability of when and not if a lot of these players I think will move on if they do make the jump, in level as highly expected. But if we now make the jump from the cup final and to the senior side, Stanislav Cherchesov, as I mentioned at the top of the show, did announce his latest national team squad. Now, this is a full squad. It's not the final. It includes a list of reserves and 4 names from which will be cut from this for the tournament at the end. Now, the squad is as follows. The goalkeepers are Jupin, Lunyov, Shunin, and Safanov. Defenders, Zhikia, Deveev, Fernandez, Yevgeniev, Zhirkov, Karavayev, Kudryashov, Samoshnikov, and Semyonov. In midfield, Barinov, Rifat Shemaletinov, Mukin, Golovan, Zakarian, Zobnin, Fomin, Yonov, Kuzyaev, Mostovoy, Ozdoyev, Makarov, Miranchuk, and Cheryshev, and then Sobolev, Zuba, and Zabolotny are the strikers. He has named a list of reserves, including Maximenko, Smolnikov, Gazinsky, Smolov, Mirzov, Chistyakov, and Lisovoy. Now, I must admit, some of these names are quite surprising to see. There is some crop of youngsters in there who were previously regulars in the under-21. We'll get on to why they aren't in that squad later on, but Arsen Zakarian is the first name that really stands out to me. And David and Alexei from RFN have been doing some research, and if Zakarian makes his debut for Russia in the friendlies against Poland, in Bulgaria, or the opening game of the Euros, he will become the youngest player to feature for the Russian national team, beating Igor Akinfeev. Including Soviet-era players, he would be the 3rd youngest player to receive a cap for Sbornaya in history, behind Eduard Streltsov and Sergei Rodionov, which is an unbelievable list of names, to be honest, to be alongside them two. So there are some surprises in there, and to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that some of the reserves aren't in the squad, chiefly Smolov. David, do you think, unless avoid David, what do you think of this squad? Is this progressive from Stani or too many older names?
It's a mixed bag, isn't it? I don't think any of us were expecting Zaharian to be called up. Stani rarely called up anyone under the age of 25, and here he is calling up a guy who's not even 18 yet, amongst Deveev, Yevgeniev, Samoshnikov, and who's the other one, Makarov, who were all 23 or under. So surprising, and Safonov, sorry. So a surprising selection there with some of those names. Obviously, it's a bigger squad than normal, 27, but he's only having to cut 4, so at least a couple of those guys are, will go to the tournament. And Mukin, sorry, I forgot about Mukin down there in the midfield. So a really weird mix of players, because then you've got on the opposite end of the scale, you've got Yuri Zhirkov still there, and Fyodor Kudryashov, and Yonov. God, it's just depressing to see Yonov there again. Mirzov has been in, as much as we hate to say it sometimes, because he has sort of been a bit of the villain at times for no real reason. Mirzov has been very good this season. I think he's more of a villain just because he plays for Khimki, and no one particularly likes Khimki. But he has been insanely good this season. He suits a very specific style, but I think he deserves to be in the squad far more than Yonov. But it's just Stani with his mates again. We saw him call up Gabulov constantly because they were mates from Dynamo days. I'm assuming the Yonov and Stani also have a relationship from their Dynamo days. It's a bit annoying to see names like that. I mean, the strikers list is highly depressing. The average height between those three is 6'3", and let's be honest, every opponent now knows how Russia is going to play. get the ball to the big guy in the box, and there's no other striker to step in and potentially offer a change up, without Smolov being in the list. So weird. Strange to see Stani doing stuff. We've talked about maybe he would, move on after this tournament. Step down and let someone else take over. But not surprised to see the same old names get called up again, because we know Stani. It's just we're too optimistic and set ourselves up for this disappointment every time. Lesavoy,
Exactly.
Dinamo have been sort of a bit naff of late, so Lesavoy's form has dropped, and ultimately probably didn't deserve it as much as Murzov, but you still would want him probably over Ionov at the very least. So some surprises for definite.
I think letting ourselves get a little bit too excited is exactly just that, and I always seem to forget that Stanislav Cherchesov is probably one of the most conservative, with a small c, managers in Russian football, even at the best of times. So when you have what we would like to see is more of the previous under-21s, that under-21 golden generation, as a lot of Russian pundits like to call it, called up, but their poor performance at the under-21 Euros really put a lot of them in a little bit of a difficult position, whereby that you see they're underperforming against teams that they really should be beating, and you have to wonder, well, would they do the same at an even higher level with that international pressure? Now, my biggest issue it's more so a problem with Russia right now, but the glaring omission from all of this conversation is Fyodor Smolov, because of the form he's been in is unbelievable. And he's a totally different option up top to every other striker. But the three in Sobolev, Dzyuba, and Zabolotny are all very similar. And there seems to be a glut of big target men in Russia right now, all the way through from the PFL up to the RPL. I mean, the top scorer in the FNL is a kind of like a bit of a target man striker. Now, he's not as big as these three, but he is a bit of a header merchant, to put it anachronistically. And then some of the players who've hit a double-double this season, they got Kamilkov. He's a big target man striker. And then the three up top are all very similar. And I would just like to see a little bit of a difference in there. Like, yes, I know Stani likes to have the tip of the spear as this mould, but it would just be nice to have another option, at least even in the extended 40 whatever men it is. I can't remember the top of my head. The extended squad before he does then cut it down. Richard, what do you think about this squad composition that Stani's named?
Yeah, just to expand on the point about Smolov, I'm really, really surprised he's not called him up. I think this deeper role, he's really flourished in it at Lokomotiv since the winter break. And like we were saying, like we were all saying, it would just give Russia another option up front, because Zabolotny, Sobolev, and Dzyuba are all big, tall strikers. Like we were saying, it's going to make them quite predictable at the Euros. That's the danger. And even though he's not had a brilliant season, and probably not had a brilliant last two seasons, to be honest, even someone like Chalov would have offered some variety. Admittedly, on his current form, has he done enough to really get in the squad? Probably not. But again, he's a different type of striker to the three who have been picked. So yeah, Smolov and Chalov really, and again, just three strikers. That's just very, very light, especially with UEFA now allowing a 26-man squad. So yeah, I think Smolov has been really harshly done to there. He's come into the last parts of the season in form. He'd offer you a chance to play in this new deeper role, which he's been flourishing in at Lokomotiv on the Nikolic. He can also play as a poacher. He's a different type of striker to those three that have been picked. You'd surely be taking a fourth striker and someone to offer you a bit of a difference. I agree with David as well. I think Lesavoy's form has dropped, and he didn't have a particularly great under-23s tournament either. Lesavoy's form has dropped in recent weeks, so I can understand why he's not made the final cut. But then Ionov, you just sigh when you see his name on the team sheet, and then Kudryashov, who looked dreadful during the last international break, and Zhirkov, well, just can't wait for those two to retire at the end of this. Well, Zhirkov especially at the end of this season. I mean, and the crazy thing is he's probably actually going to start, which is just, it just beggars belief. It really just does. So yeah, I mean, it's good to see a few youngsters in there, which is nice. And like we're saying, assume a decent portion of them are going to, a fair amount of them are going to make the squad. But yeah, I think that squad's very predictable up front. I'm a bit concerned that a fourth striker hasn't been taken, and someone who give you a bit more variety in the striking roles. I just hope it's not going to make them too predictable.
Yeah, I just think there's a significant lack of balance across this. So if you look at where these players would be playing and have played under Stani, then he likes Karavayev at left back. Samoshnikov, I think, has been very good for Ruben this season. I think he just thoroughly deserves the call up. That's not an issue there whatsoever, but he is again a right-footed left back. Further up the pitch, Rifat's been playing as a number 10, Golovan's been playing as a number 10, Zaharian's been playing as a number 10. Ionov been playing as either a false 9 or a 10 for Krasnodar. Cheryshev himself has played for as half of his appearances for Valencia this season as a 10. There's just... And then Moranchuk is better in that role too. And then up top, there's just... It's so one note. It is there's a little bit lack of real depth out and pace out wide of players who play there regularly. I think the only one really is Denis Makarov, and there's no way he's going to start Makarov. I wouldn't be surprised if Makarov didn't even make it into the final 26-man squad, even though I would love to see him there because he is a genuine different option, a totally different option, what a lot of these wingers are that he has. I mean, Cheryshev had a great 2018 World Cup, but he seems to just have a good World Cup and then go missing and get injured for 4 years and then suddenly pop back up on the radar when it's a time for any form of international break. It's so bizarre. I mean, I know he scored recently, or got an assist recently for Valencia, whatever it was, but it's just such a squad that seriously looks to lack balance. I hope I'm wrong. I was wrong about 2018. So there is some real talent in there. We've got more players coming from abroad than ever before. More youngsters than Stani himself has named ever before. Some real exciting names throughout the side. And I think we will see a little bit more of a longer-term revolution after this Euros. I think I wouldn't be surprised if this was the likes of Zhirkov and Kudryashev's last tournament, or last even appearance after the tournament. So it would be... I'll reserve my longer-term judgment for after the Euros because it is such a specific thing. But a worrying lack of balance there. And to move on, there was also the under-21 Russia squad named this week. Now, this is very much a new look after a lot of the previous cohort, as mentioned, were called up to the main squad or aged beyond the upper limit after the Euro 21 group stages. So, David, to save everybody from having to hear me butcher a bunch of more Russian names, would you like to go through the squad?
Yeah, for definite. So this squad is now players who are born on the 1st of Jan 2000 or later. So the last tournament, obviously, we had a bunch of 23-year-olds involved, mainly due to the delay from COVID. So goalkeepers, we got Botnar, Boriska, Katsev and Budachov. In defence, we got Maslov, Klusevich, Bozhinov, Silyanov, Karpov, Brokhin, Litvinov, Hotulev, Agapov, and Stepanov. Midfield, we've got Maradishvili, Umyarov, Prutsev, Chernikov, Ignatov, Krytsov, Sadulaev, Karapuzov, Ovanesyan, and Savikian. And then up front, we've got Tukavin, Kosarev, and Klimov.
So what do you think about that? Because my honest initial look at that is up front, really a little bit barren. I mean, Tukavin's playing a lot for Dinamo, not necessarily always as a striker, but playing very good football at times this season. But after that, Kosarev and Klimov, it is a little bit breadth and depth, especially considering the size of the squad.
Yeah, I mean, before the squad was called up, I was looking around, like trying to think who could be called up. You know, there's a list of reserves as well, and the only other striker involved there is Timur Suleimanov of Nizhny Novgorod on loan from Lokomotiv. But like other than that, like I could only list the only other two strikers who I thought might get in the squad were Kutovoy and Sabua from Krasnodar, and they both played for the first team this season, but didn't impress, and they've played regularly for a struggling Krasnodar too in the FNL. So Tukavin, went to the under-21 tournament earlier this year, and has obviously been playing regularly for Dynamo and looking pretty decent. Kosarev and Klimov have a history with the Russian youth setup. They both come through and have played at the under-17 and the under-19 level. I didn't think they would get called up. Klimov's playing semi-regularly for Tambov in the Premier League at the moment, and Kosarev for Tom Tomsk in the FNL. Actually scored a few as well, to be fair. But I didn't think they were of the level for this team. So when I saw them there, I was like, damn, the striker shortlist at this age group is currently a bit thin. Obviously, we all thought Zakharyan would be in this squad after his starring at the under-21s, but obviously he's been bumped up, and Mukin, obviously, from the senior squad, will also be eligible for this. So there's two names there who could have been involved here but aren't. But yeah, the striker is definitely the weak part. The list of defenders and midfielders are solid. The goalkeepers will be interesting to see. None of the four goalies have had experience in the Premier League yet. You've got Botnar and Borisko, who have had a fairly extensive FNL experience. Katsev got a few cameos for Krasnodar this season during their crisis and struggled, to say the least. I was surprised to see him involved, I must say. So the midfield and the defence is particularly strong. You've got Prokyan, who's looking quite good for Sochi on loan at the moment. The right backs Bozhinov and Klusevich. That's they're two good right backs this season in the Premier League. They both had excellent seasons. And then in midfield, you've got guys like Ignatov, who's been excellent for Spartak too. Maradishvili, Umyarov. There's some good players in there, mixed in with some who are less experienced at the top level yet.
It's weird to hear that Stepanov is still in this squad, because it feels like Daniil Stepanov's been around for about 5 or 6 years now.
I know, it's mad when he broke through for Rubin as a 17-year-old when he was in that first season. But he's been decent for Rotol this season. Playing regularly, it makes sense that he's involved, considering how much football he's had this year. And admittedly, at left back, Russia do struggle. Like Silyanov is probably the other left back in the squad, and he's played most of this season as a right back for Kazanka in the PFL. So that's one of the problem positions, probably in terms of depth, is left back after Stepanov.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that a lot of these players are really just stepping up to this level for the first time, or at least in this.
Yeah,
the majority of this team aren't regulars here. This is very much the start of now what is a transition. And Russia do have some easier games, some more difficult games. They have Spain, Malta, Northern Ireland, Lithuania, and Slovakia, all before the end of 2021. So I would preface by saying those who may expect a lot from these players, yes, they are promising talents, but even at under 21 level at the international stage, there's very little experience here. So if they do have some poor results, don't worry. It's more about a little bit of a more long-term thing. These are what the current crop are, who we're hoping to see break into the first team 3 to 4 years ago. So a lot of them are. Zaharian's really an outlier and a bit of an anomaly that he has jumped straight into the first team because of the effect he's had this season and just how good he has been. So I think that there's a lot of lower league talent here, and that's really indicative of the limit check rules, David, do you think, and showing that has been successful in the FNL?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been following the limit check rule for the last couple of seasons, and we've seen a lot more players of that age group, which is, under 21, I think. Well, it's a certain date they've got to be born before. I think there's been almost double the players used in matchday squads, not necessarily played on the pitch, but at least on the bench this season in the FNL. Obviously, there's more teams involved, so that sort of helps the matter. But, a lot of these guys, by my maths, you mentioned this before, so I did a quick bit of maths. By my maths, 16 of these players have played in the FNL in the past 3 seasons, and 6 of them have played in the PFL this season. So that's like, of the 27, that's 23 of them who have played at some point in the lower two divisions of Russian football, and the rest have all either not played in those levels or play abroad. We've got one neighbour from abroad there, so a real testament. Guys like a lot of these guys had their proving grounds in the FNL. Bozhanov last year, he broke out in the FNL, and this season he's been excellent in the Premier League. The same with Yarov, who came through at Chertanova. So it's promising to see this rule actually having an impact. It was always going to be interesting to see how this squad would come together, looking at the current group of players playing in the RPL and realizing that under 21 level there isn't enough for a full squad. So we knew they were going to have to dip into that other tier, or would they dip into reserve teams? I remember looking a few weeks back at like previous under 21 tournaments, and it was all guys who were just playing for Lokomotiv's reserves, like not even in the FNL or reserve teams at Premier League sides. So at least most of these guys are playing regular professional football. Granted, it's only the FNL for a lot of them, but at least they've got that experience. But this will be a whole new curve for them, to play on international level.
I know it's a little bit of a very favourable thing in Russian football, echo chambers, to constantly have a go at the RFU, and for good reason. I mean, we bang that drum of the ridiculous structure sometimes and decisions that they make quite often, and rightly so, more often than not. But credit where credit's due to the regulatory bodies who created this limit check rule, because the foreigner limit in the RPL is a joke, but the age limit that they created in the FNL is really seriously one of the better decisions that they have made for the long-term financial success of these clubs and for the long-term development of the players themselves. And it's good to see that. I mean, maybe I'm being a little bit naive. Perhaps part of the reasoning was looking at potential long-term financial investment, but it's good to see that they have the players' long-term development in mind, because this was a crucial development. And the sheer list of youngsters who are not just playing for the sake of being named to satisfy these rules, but thriving at this level, really is, it's heartwarming to see for the potential the longevity and long-term future of the lower leagues. And I will, at the end, as I do a little quick news roundup, discuss some potential structural changes or in the future and some current rebranding of the lower leagues. But before that, we will finish off with some analysis of our game of the week and potential ramifications of that. That is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Rubin Kazan's 4-2 win away at Arsenal this weekend. Now, we picked this one partly because it was an entertaining game, and Rubin came from behind to win it with aplomb, but it's also the ramifications ahead of next week, which is the last game week of the league. Now, as things stand, the only real critical junctures and battles that are left are that one of Arsenal, Ufa, or Rota could be relegated automatically, and two of Rubin, Sochi, or Siska could go through to the Conference League. Now, with, of course, Lokomotiv winning the cup, the position has dropped down to the next place team. Now, I will preface the relegation battle before we discuss it and the game itself with a bit of a licensing update. Krylia, Torpedo, and Baltica were granted licenses. Orenburg and Alania Vladikavkaz have been denied them. Now, Orenburg have announced that they plan to appeal to the Court of Arbitrations for Sport over this regarding the stadium, and have also made subsequent announcements about potentially expanding the stadium to meet the 10,000 limit. And the local government in Orenburg, of course, Orenburg are partially a subsidiary of Gazprom and partially local government owned. They have promised funds to help the process of that. But there have been some changes in the regulations where, in lieu of lower placed teams moving up into the playoffs. So, as things stand, because Orenburg and Alania have been denied promotion, 13th and 14th in the RPL would actually take precedence over the sides outside the playoffs. So if, say, Orenburg and Alania, who are second and fourth, were denied licenses, then it's expected Krylia and Nizhny would be promoted automatically. and there would be no promotion relegation playoffs, as Arsenal and Ufa, who are currently 13th and 14th, would stay up automatically. Now, this is still very much in the works because we've had a look at these rules and they are unbelievably vague and obtuse, and I think it's honestly a little bit intentionally ambivalent so they can kind of be flexible. Read into that what you will. But anyway, Richard, you kept an eye on this game. Would you like to go through a little bit of an analysis of the match and what really stood out for you?
Yeah, this this definitely was the game of the week in the RPL last week. It was I must stress, James, that if anybody watched this game, it was absolutely pouring it down in Tula. There was so much standing water on the side of the pitch, and you could look at it. You had to look. The weather was absolutely bucketing it down with rain. The sides of the pitch were just soaked with water, and yeah, it was the first half was interesting because basically one side of the pitch was where both sides were looking to attack. I noticed a few times Bakayev and Zuyev and Bakayev down the left flank for Rubin were attacking a lot, doing some combination play. And then it was Husevic for Arsenal Tula down Arsenal Tula's right. The other half of the pitch, there was very, very few attacking chances down that half because, especially at the end where Rubin were attacking, it really just there was so much standing water at that end. The ball just ended up when it was being passed on the floor, it just stopped in the water. Quite a few examples of players when they were sliding to try and keep the ball in play, they slid and then they got absolutely soaked with water. It was quite funny. I remember Zuyev getting absolutely soaked once when trying to keep a ball in play. And what happened? Yeah, and Arsenal took a 2-goal lead in this game. And then you fought 2-0 half time. They were looking in a good position, although I will state that they didn't have a huge amount of chance in that half, even though they went in 2-0 in front. I actually thought Rubin were just as good as them in the first half. They had some good chances themselves. Makarov had a few chances. And then the second half, the game just completely changed. Credit to the referee and the VAR team. They spotted a pull on Karl Starfelt's shirt by Tkachov, who'd already been booked in the first half, and it was definitely clearly a penalty. He clearly pulled Starfelt back in the box, and then it was given at 2-0. He was sent off for a second yellow card, deservedly so. And Rubin scored the penalty, and after that just completely changed the game. I really enjoyed Rubin's second goal. It was a punt up field which found great hold up play again by Despotovic, who laid off the pass, laid off the ball to Bakayev, who then slotted Makarov in, and he had a nice finish to make it 2-2. And then Starfelt scored from a corner to make it 3-2. And then right at the very last minute, I think Starfelt's goal came just after, a couple of minutes after Rubin had levelled it. And then right at the end, the substitute Kostyukov made it 4-2. And it was a brilliant turnaround by Rubin. Obviously, the red card and the penalty played an impact in changing the game, but I certainly thought, even though Rubin went in at halftime 2-0 down, they matched Arsenal Tula in the first half. It certainly was an even half, just Arsenal Tula took their chances. And a great win for Slutsky's team, and credit to them even in the first half, because even though it was really difficult conditions for both sides, to be fair to Rubin and Slutsky, they were trying to get the ball down and pass it. Rubin in that first half, they weren't just going long with a play. They were, trying to play football on a very difficult pitch in very difficult conditions. And yeah, they're looking a good bet now to qualify for Europe. Obviously, Lokomotiv's cup win now helps them because 4th and 5th are going to be the Conference League spots. And yeah, the ramifications for this at both ends of the table are pretty big because, Rubin obviously now looking in a good position to qualify for Europe. And then Arsenal Tula, well, they might still get relegated yet. And they've been probably one of the disappointments of the season. They've got a decent squad for RPL level. I'm not saying that they've got a squad that's capable of finishing, qualifying for Europe, but they've certainly got a squad which should be anywhere between 8th and 12th really in the league. I'm personally not a fan of Dmytro Parfyonov, the coach. He didn't do a great job at Ural. I remember Ural playing in the Cup semi-final last year against Himki, who were obviously coached by Sergei Yuran at the time. And Himki, despite being a FNL side, just completely outplayed them. They completely outplayed Parfionov's to Ural, and he was sacked by Ural shortly after that. And this season at Arsenal, Tula, he's not really getting, anything much out of that squad. I thought when they beat Zenit in the cup just after the restart, I thought, right, they're going to get going now, they're going to start climbing the table, but they're just not. And yeah, they really could get relegated this weekend, because they're playing Ufa away, and Ufa have looked a lot better under Stukalov. And for a side like Arsenal Tula, with some of the players that they have, they should be doing better. Really, they shouldn't be in the relegation zone in the bottom four. So yeah, it was a great win for Rubin, great turnaround, and a deserved win. But Arsenal Tula are really looking nervously over their shoulders now. But it was a great game despite the weather, which was absolutely horrendous.
I think Arsenal, I mean, they're not a small club or a young club. They were founded just after the Second World War. But Arsenal are one of those teams who have made a success quite quickly, quite recently. They, of course, were promoted 2 years in a row from the PFL to the FNL and then through the RPL under Elenichev. So they were really fast-tracked, and then obviously solidified that, got to Europe. And then this season, despite the managers and having, in my eyes, who is one of the worst managers in the RPL, if not the worst, and Dmitry Parfionov, the team, like you said, Richard, is really far better than where it should be. I think it was near the start of the season, after they closed the transfer window, I looked at their business and thought, you know what, this is a pretty solid team. Yevgeny Lutsenko had just came off the back of the season of his life. They've got some strong players throughout the squad. Maxim Balyayev was close to a Sbornaya call not even 18 months ago. And then with the Kangwa brothers, they've got some of the best and most dynamic, affordable foreigners in the league. I think is the best way of saying it, affordable.
I like Klusevic, I quite like.
Yeah.
He came through last year, looked quite good. Apparently, I think David was saying on one of the pods last year that I think Klusevic has had trials at Porto and Benfica in the past. He's in the under-21 squad. So yeah, they've got some good players.
So it is depressing to see them in this state, and I think a lot of that comes down to Parfionov, but more so a lack of a long-term vision. They've been one of those clubs where, at the very top, at the director level, have been run far too in the short term. And God, believe me, I'm a Sunderland fan. I know exactly what it's like for a club to be run in the short term, looking from bounce to bounce. And it's exactly that. It's a team of players who are better than they are. A team of players who think that they are better than they are as well, mind some of them. But then also, at the very top level, it's bouncing from manager to manager. They had Cherevchenko and Popaldi and Parfionov. And where's the vision? Where's the long-termism here? Why is it every time a manager comes in, his rule is law, and then only to be sacked? The average lifespan of a manager in modern football is less than 18 months. Think more long-term. They're suffering because of that. So they've only got themselves to blame, but that squad should not be where it is. David, were you? I guess you were pretty damn ecstatic with the Rubin comeback.
Oh yeah, I mean, just to add to Arsenal, they've got to go to Ufa next week away, and they've got one away point all season, which is I checked among the top 5 leagues. That's the worst out of the top 5 leagues. No team in the top 5 leagues got a worse away record. I didn't check any further past that. And I also checked historically in the RPL, and it's the worst away record in at least the last 6 years. Unless they get a win, obviously, on the final day, which would, I think, bring them level with Ska Habarovsk, as I recall. So that's some very bad form. 1 point in 14 games away from home all season. Yeah. But, yeah, I was delighted with the result, obviously, as a Rubin fan. I did not... At half-time, I was very deflated. I just could not see us getting back in it. Obviously, we were lacking Feature still with injury, although he's back in training, and we were missing Huang as well. I just thought, how are we going to get back in this game? And then, yeah, post-penalty, we were just absolutely dominant, got another goal quite quickly off the counter through Makarov. Kostov then nodded off the corner, and then we just saw out the game and took a chance. It was interesting, and I want to give credit to Ivan Ignatiev, who's been long term abused pretty much by all of us on this podcast, myself included, for his very poor form since signing for Rubin for a decent fee as well. But he came on. Slutsky made the choice to bring him on in the first half in the 40th minute, which was an odd time to make a sub. Why not wait till half time? There was no injury. But he brought him on, went 2 up front, and he actually had a decent game. He got him behind a couple of times. He got the assist for the final goal. He was involved. He was just involved, which was just a difference. He still looked rusty, and he admitted after the game that he's found this season hard. Struggling for game time with Desporovic playing so well. But all credit to him because he had a decent performance. And yeah, thanks to Loko obviously winning the cup. All we've got to do is I think minimum of a draw against Rotor on the final day, at home, which ultimately we should be beating Rotor, who are a team at the bottom. Touch wood. A win gets us 4th place minimum. If Lokomotiv drop points against Ural, which seems unlikely, we would, I think, sneak 3rd place if we win and they lose, which would be a bit of a pipe dream. I didn't realise until yesterday that there's no direct places in the Conference League. Everyone has to qualify. So that did put me off slightly. Rio and I realised that no matter what happens, we're going to have to qualify for this. I was hoping we'd be in Europe and just get a nice group stage, but that seems to not be the case. But just getting back in Europe for Rubin after so many poor seasons would be fantastic. And it's already before this game, it's our best season since like 2013. So yeah, really, really good win. Really good win.
Yeah, I think with the Conference League, if correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, every team has to qualify from some form or another. They either play in the playoffs or are eliminated from the Europa League playoffs. I don't think anyone just automatically is in the Conference League group stage, apart from maybe the ones who win like a domestic cup. I think England have got one team for the Conference League, and that would be the team who wins the League Cup. I think those perhaps might, but on league position, it's a weird one because they all have to qualify, so they're all going to be playing in like July. So, Richard, any last words on the potential European battle?
Just to come in on the Conference League, I did have a look yesterday actually because I'm preparing an future article for it. I'll just give you a little bit of a snip. It's not for RFN, it's for another site, but yeah, I saw the other day, and the team finishing, I think, in the second qualifying round for the Conference League will be the team that finishes 5th in the RPL. I had a look the other day; they would be seeded. I did have a look at that, and I checked that the other day, so they would be seeded. I'm not sure about the 3rd qualifying round, which the 4th place team enters, or the playoff round, but obviously that's dependent on results, isn't it, and what your coefficient is. But I think the side who finishes 5th and goes into the second qualification round of it is seeded from the RPL. And yeah, you're right. I think every team does have to qualify for it. I think the teams in the top 5 leagues you will enter, they're only getting 1 place each. It's mainly a competition for the leagues 6th and below in the UEFA coefficient ratings. They go into the playoff round, and I think everybody else's representatives goes into the 3rd round and below, depending on strength of league. So yeah, and like I say, one thing I will say is that, and in a way, I'm very happy if Sochi and Rubin qualify for it, because we've been bemoaning, sometimes some of the poor quality of managers in the RPL. But if Sochi and Rubin qualify, they've got 2 of the best managers in the RPL in Fedotov and Slutsky. So I think that can make a difference. And I say I'm really looking forward to this competition. I think we don't know what's going to happen with Krylia yet at Rubin, but if they can get a good, if they do end up selling him for big money, then that's a chance to revitalise bits of their squad with that. And I'm intrigued to see what Sochi can do. I think they will now start to probably. They've stabilised themselves in the RPL now. They qualify for it, so it might be time now to not just rely on a few loans from, maybe still rely on the odd loan from Zenit here and there, but maybe branch out. They've still got foreign spots available, so I'm actually looking forward to seeing how these 2 clubs do in Europe. I mean, I know a lot of people have been moaning CSKA and Krasnodar not qualifying for it, but recently in the last few years, especially Sascada performances have been dreadful in Europe. So let's give other teams a go. I mean, I think Sochi and Rubin could do no worse, than Sascar have done. So no, I'm quite happy, and two good coaches. Hopefully, the RPL will get some good results with Rubin and Sochi coached by two good coaches. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it's really not going to be much more difficult to get better than last season, considering the two Europa League teams who had to qualify were knocked out by minnows at the earliest opportunities. And then we went through one of the worst group stages ever, where only one win. So hopefully changing up the guard a little bit in this aspect could help that. Now, the Conference League's a weird one because I'm both excited by it and incredibly pessimistic about it. I think as the football nerd in me, that most of us here are, and most of us listening probably are, we'd all love it. I mean, Liechtenstein, the winner of the Liechtenstein Football Club, has a potential chance to play in the Conference League. That's great. That's what it should be. Let's have a competition for the next level of elite, so it's not just the same bloody 12 teams all try to bugger off in the first place. But the other side of this is, I don't know if the wider interests and wider public opinion and wider viewing figures will be there. I hope it is, but I'm not quite sure what the long-term life of this league's going to be. And you mentioned Slutsky is one of the best managers. If anyone has seen I think it's on Shirkov's Instagram, the video on Yuri Shirkov's Instagram of Slutsky just absolutely losing it and berating the Russia team when he was manager back then, and Shirkov just getting destroyed by him. It's a real good watch, and it's good to see that other side of Slutsky, because we all know how happy-go-lucky he can be and a bit jovial. So it's good to see both sides of the man. But anyway, that is the end of this week's RFN podcast. I will quickly finish off by mentioning that news that I did tease earlier, that the headline is that the PFL will cease to exist. So at the end of this season, and from the beginning of the 2021-22 championship, all PFL clubs will become part of the FINA-L. So don't worry, it's not like they're going to be a 110 division league yet, but there'll basically be the FINA-L, where it is now, or 20 teams, and then below that will be the clubs of the former PFL divided into 4 different groups. So that is the official end of the PFL, which is kind of expected. A lot of people did really expect that after the Eastern group was removed and submerged into the other divisions last season. Some have said that this is a bit of a pointless move. I personally can see the efficacy and the reasoning behind this, in that the FINA-L will now be one individual body that will regulate the entirety of lower league football in Russia. It very much it's based upon the English model of the Premier League, and then directly below that, the Football League is directly responsible for the long-term and short-term regulation, stability, and control of these clubs from afar. It's also good marketing. The PFL is very, very dated. The marketing around it all looks very 1992 when the PFL was created. Obviously, this is followed, and 2 years ago the RPL was rebranded. Last year the FINA-L, and next year will be, or this year and then next year will be, the PFL. So this is following in the trend of an overhaul of the image, the outward-looking image of Russian football, which, while change is not always nice for some of us purists, I think it's inevitable for the long-term survival or long-term marketability of the leagues. So it's a good thing. It's not as sensationalist as the headlines have claimed. It's not really like the death of the PFL. It's exactly the same thing, really. It's just more regulations, more unification of the regulations, and more unification of the marketing around it. So I think it's a good move. There is an article on the site that I wrote a few years ago where I was actually arguing for a regionalisation of the FINA-L. In that, one of the routes I investigated was called the Unified Proposals League, in which the 4 PFL divisions and the 20 FNL clubs would then split into 6 regional divisions directly below the RPL, and in that they would be sized in such a way that the East wouldn't just be left like it was, which is an interesting development, and I wonder if this is perhaps a step towards that. Now, directly below the RPL, no, but a step towards restructure and allowing clubs to geographically and financially become more self-sufficient. Good, definitely. Like I say, the FNL has made some good decisions of late and really are leading the way in some of their forward-thinking developments, like the limit checks. So for them to now be subsumed, the PFL to be subsumed within the FNL and controlled in that way, I think is personally a good thing, just for the unification. So that is, like I said, the end of the podcast. We'll be back next week for the little bit of a review of the end of the RPL and FNL season, as we do hit the business end of the year, and then keep an eye out in the future for the obligatory Team of the Season podcast, in which we'll be handing out some RFN awards. Until then, goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.